So our objective today is this. We are looking at wholes in 612. It is a written assignment. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading chapter 6 and asking some questions about comparing and contrasting. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to compare and contrast your life and some of your experiences with Stanley. And you should be able to compare and contrast some stereotypes or traditional thoughts with what actually happens in the plot of Stanley's story. Okay, so let's do like a little recap about compares and contrasting. This really piggies back off of what we talked about last week in 611. So comparing and contrasting can help you even with decisions. Pros and cons, those sorts of lists that you make are sometimes a variant of this comparing and contrasting. Okay, so when we write about differences, that is a little bit more complex than writing about similarities. So it's harder to write about differences because you have to use transition words and pinpoint specific information. It's a lot easier to say they're both blue than to be more distinguishing about differences. Okay, so things that can help you list differences are columns, charts, a Venn diagram, or a modified T-chart. So the Venn diagram we looked at last week, and it's those two circles that overlap. And so the things that are different are on the outside, the things that are the same are on the middle. I want to show you a modified T-chart. And what we can do is you can compare and contrast bigger ideas. You can compare and contrast stories too. You've probably done this where you might have read a book about something and then you compare and contrast it to the show or the movie. So here what we have is an example of comparing and contrasting the story Holes to the story The Nickel Boys. So there are similarities that both of these stories have a similar plot, that they focus on good boys who got into trouble for crimes they didn't commit. They were both theft in this case, and both boys were sent away from home to a juvie or a reformatory for some sort of criminal discipline. Okay. So then what they've done is they've put Holes on one side and the Nickel Boys on the other, and they've contrasted how they're different. So they've said overall they kind of have some similarities, but they're different because Holes takes place in 1998 in Texas. It's fictional, whereas the setting of Nickel Academy is based on real places, and it's in 1962 in Florida. They have differences with their main character. Stanley is white, he's heavyset, he's bigger, whereas Elwood is black, he's thin, he's got glasses, and then their villains are a little bit different too. Okay, so this is an example of how you can visually write out your differences when you're comparing and contrasting different stories and different ideas. What we're going to do is we're going to read chapter 6 of Holes, and we're going to compare and contrast Stanley's experiences with our experiences. So the way that I want you to do this is you can do it one of two ways. You can access it through K-12. So I'm going to view it as a student and show you. So if you like to just have everything in K-12, you go to your content, and then Unit 6, Purposes in Writing, and then you'll scroll down to 612, Comparing and Contrasting. And don't get overwhelmed by what you see here. So there's a lesson. So this is the slideshow. I gave us the super brief version. And then there's an assignment. So there's two pieces to this assignment. One of them is the text, and the other one is the questions, okay? So what you want to do is, if you like K-12, open this up so that you can see the text. And we're going to read the text. We'll read about a page, and then we'll answer a question, because the way that it actually lines up is that question number 1 is on page 1, and question number 2 is on page 2. Okay, so that's one way that you can get your text up and you can have your questions. So if you are using K-12, what you want to do is you want to just like select all and copy, and then respond at the bottom. So you click it. So you have to actually click the assignment, and then you can type your answers in the text submission. That will pop up. Okay, so if you like that, then you can, I like to do things quick. I like to select all. If you like to highlight it, that's totally fine, but then you'll paste it down here and you'll write your answers. Okay. I don't know. Sometimes things get a little wonky when you copy and paste, but you get the general idea here. Okay, so that's one option. Totally fine. If you're like, oh, I really hate text submission in K-12, what you can do is I put a link to your Google Classroom. I also put this in Google Classroom. So in the assignments, you can see that I have a quick link here. So we're in period 2 right now. I will click period 2, and that will connect you to your classroom. If you like to go through Google and, you know, the little waffle buttons, whatever, that's fine. I'm just showing you a possible way. And now our wholes, compare and contrast, is right at the top. If you view it in classwork, it's also right on the top. I like doing things in Google Classroom because it gives you, I feel like it's easier to write. So you have your text and then you have your questions. Okay, so this is the setup. Now we're going to go into actually answering those questions, okay?